Reclaiming Timeless Ways, episode number 6 in our series. Mike Traster, Simon Fuller, glad to have you along today. Mike, another journey awaits us. Some knowledge, some stories, some humor, some seriousness. Right. What will we be discussing today, my friend?
Well, you know, it's interesting. You talk to pastors, the good and the bad and the ugly, so to speak, and you ask them, so you talk for 30 minutes, how long does it take you to put together your talk? And they go, 10, 20 hours. And it's like, wow. So between our shows, when I'm having lunch, I sit down sometimes with a couple sheets of paper, and I really kind of go over and over in my mind what's useful, where's the meat, what is going to help somebody. If somebody is knee-deep or nose-deep in rough, shark-infested waters, in their own body or mind problems or their relational issues, what can we share with them that's going to help them?
Right.
And so I might have pages and pages of notes, and then I'll just let that sort of simmer in my head and let most of it fall off the page and get it down to a few things.
Sure.
Right? So the first thing I said to you, I kind of made a joke about it, making fun of my own nature. And that is, well, you know, you have to make friends and enemies both, or you're not doing anything.
That's a true statement, never truer.
Right. So you actually have to, your feet, it's like if you're on a slick, tipped surface that's covered with mud, your feet aren't planted. You're not standing anywhere, you're just sliding.
Sure.
Or you're on a ride. But you're not getting it. You can't get anything done. So you have to actually find some firm ground, take a meaningful stance that you've morally identified, and make a stance not for the purpose of making a stance, but because that's just ego-driven garbage, but because it matters.
Right.
So the thing that I came up with in terms of the things we get stuck in is a term called spiritual materialism. And spiritual materialism, the term that when I came across it was coined, to the best of my knowledge, first by a man named Alan Watts. And he was a British theologian, and during the course of his life, he became more and more interested in Eastern mystical religion. So he became interested in Buddhism and in the study of the Tao and Zen. And so Buddhism is both theistic and non-theistic depending on the individual, right? And so if you say, well, do you believe in God? Every Buddhist is going to have a different answer, right? I'm not a Buddhist, I'm Christian. But that doesn't mean I can't find anything useful. If I own a garage and I fix cars, it doesn't mean I can't learn something from a Chevy mechanic if I fix Dodges.
Right.
It means you can still look around and ask questions and share insight and experience.
Sure.
You know. So spiritual materialism means it's just an ego game, right? Oh, I can meditate longer than you. I'm superior to you. Right? Yeah, right. It's
right.
like,
oh yeah.
What did we step in?
Right.
Know, it's sickening.
And it happens.
And it injures people.
Injures people, and oftentimes I think even injures that whole foundation of whatever it is that they're raising their nose up that they're better for. So when you use the idea of religion or Christianity, how often do we run into to somebody who says, you know, hogwash, I don't buy that.
Don't
why?
buy what?
I mean, not that I'm going to condemn you for your beliefs, but why? Well, because you know, I met some of the biggest Christians I know are some of the most conceited, greedy, this, and they have a list of things that they don't like about them. Well, they're not the definition of Christianity, but they've injured that whole concept of Christianity.
When somebody says that to me, you know what I tell them? I say, you want an honest response to that? They'll say, yeah. I said, you're 100% right.
Right.
You are 100% right.
Right.
You know, it's like, show me a doctor with all their education, or a nurse practitioner, etc., who doesn't have ego issues.
Right.
Don't exist. We're human.
Right.
So we're walking. We should have a third shoe on our forehead for how often we fall down. You know. So, but the thing is, it's like whatever your spiritual practice is. So, like the Buddhists, okay, they have a whole different set of belief systems. Although there are some parallels. The Zen practitioner, they believe in just being still and being 100% present in the moment. And if you think about that, right, what does that mean? It means when I'm paying attention to you, that's what I'm doing.
Right.
I'm not paying attention to you and the coffee cup and the microphone and my piece of paper, because all those things are like cutting slices out of the pie. And then after not very many cuts, I'm no longer present.
Right.
I'm gone. There's just this shell that looks like Mike. It might even be making some automatic noise, but I'm
Sure.
gone. I checked out.
Right.
Elvis left the auditorium, so to speak. So the spiritual materialism, whatever your belief, your faith walk is, it destroys the meat or the substance, the relational substance between you and your creator. So it's like it gets back to relationship. You know, one of the things like when we're spiritually material, we're arrogant, and arrogance is driven by fear, right? I'm afraid I can't be equal unless I'm superior.
Sure.
Ow.
Right.
If you think about that, it's like, that's a nightmare, because you're always in the state of panic to be better,
Right.
to bully people into feeling like, oh, I better look up to him or her, or they're going to kick my butt one way or another in some hierarchy.
Right.
That's a crazy person.
Right.
And so our systems encourage that kind of craziness. Almost all of our systems do.
Right.
You know, you see it locally in a large retail business. It's terrible.
Yeah.
You know, and it chews people up and spits them out
Right.
like garbage.
Right.
You know, so one of the things that I think it's really essential to come to, not as a platitude to say, oh yeah, that's true, and then change the subject and erase it quickly,
Right.
but really to take a moment and acknowledge it. Is in your life and in my life and all of our lives, with no exception, maybe except with the exception of Christ, everyone is broken in some ways.
Sure.
Right? We're physically, spiritually, emotionally, energetically broken in some ways. Maybe I have a deep injury to a joint in my thumb, which I do from a car wreck. That doesn't mean my whole hand doesn't work. It just
Right.
means it doesn't work quite as well, and it talks to me. And it's not saying anything nice, you know?
Right.
I have to deal with it.
Right.
So it doesn't mean I sit there and look at my thumb and weep, you know, but it's like, okay, I got to massage my thumb, it hurts, right? Is that good? No, it sucks.
Yeah.
Oh, it does. Yeah, of course it does, you know, but
Right.
do I sit there and, is it my identity?
Right. Does it define you?
No,
Right.
it damn well better not.
Right.
Because then I'm just having a pity party, and I'm hijacking people's attention with guilt.
Right.
But I actually am not contributing anything. There's just this drama. Oh, poor Mike. He's in intense pain, which isn't true. I'm in mild discomfort that comes and goes. That's
Right.
true, right? But if I'm feeling isolated and I'm feeling like nobody's going to pay attention to me, I have this game, my thumb, from the hangnail, or what, or a slight twitch, like Peter Falk's eye twitch, remember in Columbo? Mm-hmm. Or whatever it is. So we do that instead of saying to ourselves, what is it that has meaning in my life that I can apply myself to for 4 minutes a day?
Right.
Something instead of nothing, you know? So, because people are broken, and because people try to float to the top by pushing others down, people become desperate. I think I mentioned briefly that I have been going around the community talking. We had a suicide in my family many years ago. I don't remember exactly how she did it. It was very sad. It was a divorce and a very rough family situation. I think she took her life with exhaust gases. It's just horrifying. And everybody always knew her as very pleasant,
Sure.
right? But you never knew her,
Right.
right? So there she was. She was always kind. She was always hospitable. You know, she was gentle. She was kind of just pleasant, right? But it was like, in retrospect, I looked at her and I said, I don't think I ever knew anything about her. She was right there and invisible.
Right.
And there's a term that I created for that. And it can be somebody like her who was very humble and almost self-effacing, or it could be somebody who's in an intimidating position of power.
Right.
You know, like a CEO or a controller of a company or a doctor or a lawyer, right? And the term is hidden in plain view.
Yeah.
And it means that a person develops this demeanor that says, you approach me with deference, and you damn well better, because I'm the boss. I'm in control, right? And I'm the boss all the time, everywhere, without exception. So you can say, oh, hi, Dr. Mike. Hello.
Right.
Nice to see you, which means get lost.
Right.
So that person is safe because nobody can really get inside of that glass bulletproof shield around them. So whatever it is that they're suffering through, old or new, they're hidden in plain view. They're right in front of us, and all we see is this tower, right? But we don't see them. And then when we find out that they hurt themselves, or worse, we're like, wow,
Didn't see that coming.
no, right. And it was like, how many people do we know who are deeply invested in unapproachability, in being powerful or intimidating or impeccable or, you know, impressive, or these words that are kind of like the Great Pyramid of Cheops, and you see them and you don't go, hey, how you doing? You go, oh, hello, I see you're still great. Wow.
Yeah.
So you've paid homage, and now you're safe. You bought your safety
Right.
by paying homage. And also, you help them invest more in their own isolation,
Yeah.
right? So if it's my relation whose unapproachability was this meek, kind, sweet soul who was unknown, or some towering personality who's in control, they're still right in front of us and completely hidden. And that is one of the key features, I believe, of people who become self-destructive over time.
And so as, you know, I'm, you know, sort of hearing this and I'm thinking, okay, you know, a message, a meaning for you watching, you know, it really kind of boils down to, number one, be your genuine self.
Right,
and that's
absolutely.
hard because
It is hard.
you said it and it's
Right.
true. We all know it,
Right.
but we all have something that's broken. You're
Right.
not unique in that.
Right.
And that's not a bad thing. That's okay because
Right.
we all suffer from something.
Right.
And a lot of times when we're masking ourselves, it's because we don't want that vulnerability out.
Right.
And a second thing that I think is really important, you know, other than saying be your genuine self and be unapologetic to be your genuine self, the second piece of that is, Mike, you know, I'm always thinking in my head, okay, if I want to apply our conversations to a friend, a colleague, a perfect stranger,
Right.
that is better or has that facade of being better.
Sure.
How do I do that? And one of the best pieces of advice I think I heard you say in one of our earlier programs was peel back a couple of your layers. Like
Right.
you were saying to me before the
Absolutely.
show, Simon, I've got a slight tremor in my hand. Or Simon, I've
Right.
had this cancer treatment. That's
Right.
okay.
Right.
That doesn't define who I am.
No.
And you'll sometimes bring up your own brokenness
Absolutely.
to hopefully encourage a real conversation and let that individual out of that bulletproof glass, shatter that
Or you
glass.
lose something.
Yeah.
You know, at my peak in my late 30s, I could lift 290 pounds over my head.
Yeah.
And I could sit on a bench and clean press 250 10 times.
Right.
That's a lot of weight. And I think maybe there's a couple people in the NFL that can do that, but most of them can't. So I was very strong. Now, being in Iraq and then experiencing another 31 years just of time going by, you lose a little bit, and it's cumulative, and you're going, did I really do that? You know? And it was like, I did, and I miss it, you know, but it wasn't all of me, right? And if I made it all of me, then I got myself in trouble.
Yeah.
Right? So there's a sense of loss, but there also, I think, along with the sense of loss, you can add, not as denial, but as an important aspect of dealing with life, a little humor.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's okay. And
Right.
bring that up and allow them to bring that up. Oh,
Right.
geez, Mike, you have issues too. Oh, let me
Right.
talk to you a little bit
Yeah,
about
right.
something I'm kind of dealing with that
Right.
I might have never brought up because of
Exactly.
my discomfort and
Right.
and sometimes embarrassment or ashamed.
Sure.
Or I look at my 7-year-old daughter, and it's sort of a parallel. This morning, getting her ready for school, and here she was in front of this little mirror, wanting to put on a little, fake kid makeup.
Okay.
And I went into my wife and I said, "Did you see our little 7-year-old putting on makeup?" And she goes, "I know."
That's scary.
She asked her, and this is what kind of both of us went, "Oh," because Carly then asked her, "Hey, Sissy," we call her Sissy. Her name's Everly.
Okay.
What do you think makes mommy a good mommy? She's beautiful. And Carly goes, "Oh." That is not at all.
dangerous.
That is not at all the impression that we want our 7-year-old girl to get. And we both. It's okay to put that makeup on, but
Right.
already at that age, just watching, not understanding
Right.
the full effect of what mom's doing when she's
Right.
doing that. She's already gathered through television, through watching mom, others, that makes me a better me, which it
Right.
absolutely doesn't.
No, it doesn't.
It's-
It's the illusion of better.
Right. And so balancing that out, it's okay if she wants to do some of that stuff, but also understanding why, and that you are who you are with or without that, with or without a certain status of income or job placement or religion status, or you name it. That doesn't change who you are. Put your feet on the ground,
Right.
firmly planted
Right.
in what you know to be right and good.
Right.
And whether others agree with you or not, you're living the life you were supposed to live
Right. Yeah.
and meant to live.
Being born with certain facial geometry does not make a person noble.
Right?
It does not contain. There is zero nobility contained in a strong jaw,
Right.
or a weak. And there's not the absence of nobility in a weak jaw.
Right.
Either. Not one side or the other. They're irrelevant. But
Those are not the things that define us, that make us who we are. And the point is, when you bring it back, be you. It's okay to be you. It is, Mike.
Right.
And we should. It's
Right.
almost a little bit of a crime, if not a crime, to not be you.
I see these singles sites. I've been a member of several, and it's been a nightmare. And it's been a nightmare because I don't have anything to offer in the meat market,
Sure.
right? Car wreck destroyed me financially. That's a reality.
Right.
Right? So that made me no one.
Right.
Did it? Absolutely, according to the world. But the world also used to say that it was flat. It didn't. Felt it? No. It thought it? No. It knew it.
Right.
Right? So, if you own $1 billion business and the stock market wipes you out, did you cease to be who you were?
Only if you let that be who you were.
Right. Right.
And that's what you're saying. That is not the definition of you. If you let it be,
Right.
then in a sense it does wipe you
It
out.
does.
But if that's
Right.
not what you let define
Right.
you, if that's just a part of you, but
Right.
that's not you,
Right.
then it doesn't.
No. So if a woman looks, let's say, an old actress like Katharine Hepburn, magnificently beautiful lady, somebody described her once as having cheekbones like the white cliffs of Dover. This beautiful, magnificent. But you look at her and she's like this statuesque, focused, far off looking kind of, what would you say, royal beauty, right? Does that mean that she has those qualities within her?
No.
Absolutely not. It doesn't. It appears that way. And we have collectively gained an agreement that it means that.
Right.
It's a complete fiction. It's what we talked about earlier, the letter.
Right.
That's a part of the letter.
Right.
It's like there's like a whole bunch of different paragraphs. This page it just keeps unfolding, and there's more bullshit in it.
Right.
And it's like, wow, red line, another
Yeah.
lie. What else? So you see somebody at a party, and do you remember the cartoon movie Beauty and the Beast?
Oh, yeah.
And the prince.
Yeah.
Who was mean. Right? But he had that noble looking face.
Right.
But they also did a study of him where he was harsh. He was arrogant. So they let you see both sides, And it's like, well, the nobility of appearance or the appearance of nobility doesn't mean that there is or isn't. It
Right.
doesn't mean either one.
Right.
So I don't want people to hear this and think, yeah, the next time I see somebody who looks noble,
They're
I'm
not.
gonna- Right, they're automatically a rat.
Right. Right.
The rat trap, right? It doesn't mean anything. It just means they're nice looking according to a certain
Right.
standard.
You're saying look beyond,
Look beyond.
whether it's physical characteristics, whether it's what they're in a career financially, look beyond the outside.
Right.
Get inside.
Right. So going back on my little glimpse that I finally shrunk this thing down to, when we talk about people who are hidden in plain view, right? And so if you see somebody and they look like they're suffering, right? Then you figure out a way to bridge the gap if it's appropriate,
Right.
Not maybe not to a complete stranger, unless they're in pain reaching for something on a shelf. Then you can say, hey, you look like you're in pain in your back or your shoulder. I'm going to get that for you.
Yeah.
Not can I. I'm going to get that for you.
Right.
And then maybe you tell them something about yourself, But so like the path of least resistance, where we never say anything, where we never say to somebody, do you always treat your friend who doesn't make as much money with you as they're beneath you, or do you always treat your friend who makes more money than you as
Above you.
right? Instead of like, screw that crap.
Right.
Well, who are they and who are you to
Right.
each other, right? So one of the things I wrote down here is the path of least resistance often causes future nightmares. So you have a coworker and they're screwing something up royally, but somehow they've cultivated a relationship with you where you protect and pity them. The hole's gonna get deep. That's just kind of like one of the missing pillars,
Right.
in the building that we talked
Right.
about. That pillar is gonna continue to crumble.
Right.
And you're gonna be saving them and more and feeling more responsible. And that unspoken, this is only one example, right? Could be somebody that's abusive to other people in a company,
Right.
So the longer you spend not addressing it,
Right.
the more it becomes concretized in the whole, in the person and in their relationships, and the more damage it does.
Right.
So it's like, find a way to say it.
And you essentially become, without being the culprit, you become somewhat culpable. And that is sort of the meaning here, Mike, is
Right.
by you enabling, maybe is the word, by you not addressing that and putting a stop to it in, again, an appropriate way.
Right.
We're not saying, hey,
Right, not necessarily.
But yeah, maybe there's even a time for that to be
Yeah,
appropriate.
sometimes.
But ultimately,
Right.
there are appropriate ways to point out things, like you said earlier. Hey, is there a reason you always treat that person that way?
Right.
Well, I'm better. No, you're not. I mean, those things exist.
They do.
You can't say that you haven't been in a situation yourself, or that you've seen a situation like that, watching where it would be okay to step in a way. Mike, did you mean to talk to your
Right.
friend that way?
Right, yeah,
What do you mean?
right,
Gosh, you kind of put them down. Oh. And get them thinking
right.
properly. Because if you don't, they're going to treat somebody else that way and somebody else that way, and nobody stops them. What do they continue to do? Treat people worse and worse and worse and worse.
I'm going to the nursery or the hardware store and I'm buying fertilizer and I'm feeding and watering the poison ivy.
Right.
You know? And so what happens? Does it get better? No, it gets worse.
Yeah.
And I'm a contributor.
Right.
So part of this whole thing and so this hooks in back again because we keep circling back, same ideas, they're interconnecting.
Yeah, they are.
The spokes go to the center, right? So, so these are all things that are things where we are silenced.
Right.
You know, there's a lot of reinforcement to STFU, right? And
SDF.
yeah, right.
We can all fill
not
in the
a
blanks. We
university.
don't- no.
Okay, so I'm going to name a few
Okay.
of the STFU asterisks in history.
Okay.
And I'm only naming a few because I haven't made an in-depth study,
Right.
but I think everybody that's listening can add one. And then I'm going to add a huge one at the end.
Okay.
Okay? And it's like, it's endemic. It's deeply woven into the fabric of our culture. And it's not like, oh, but there's so many good things that happen that when you average it out, it's okay. That is a lie.
Yeah.
These things are nightmares of incalculable proportion when you look at them. The Titanic,
Right.
when it was built with arrogance. One of the people, and I'm not sure, but I think it was the captain, was quoted as having said, "This ship is unsinkable. God can't sink this ship." Maiden voyage, done.
Right.
They saved a bunch of money. They put in an insufficient number of lifeboats,
Right.
right? They also saved money by buying garbage rivets.
Right.
Because the ship wasn't welded together, it was riveted together, right? So that thing came apart. Like if you make a little hole in a piece of paper every eighth of an inch, it's perforated.
Right.
And once you start that tear, it just goes just like a zipper. And they say when that thing hit the iceberg, that all those rivets, they were brittle, right?
Sure.
And so they literally went pop, 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 pop,
Right.
you know, and it was the ship.
Right.
And there was an airplane crash. So everybody in that whole line of processes, and there was another issue with the different bulkheads not being sealed. So I think they had 16, I thought it was 7, but I think I read the other day there was actually 16 sealable compartments, each one of which could hold air and make the ship more buoyant.
Right.
And they weren't closed. So they meant they were of no value. It would be
Right.
like closing the screen door on a submarine.
Right,
you
right.
know? So that's a Titanic. There was at least one record. Malcolm Gladwell, who's an interesting author, talked about this. I think it was a Korean airline, but I'm about 80% sure it was Korean. So they have a very rigid hierarchical culture. And people were coming in and out of the cockpit, and it was in a holding pattern around an airport, and they were seeing on the instrument panel there was a problem. You don't speak to the captain and correct him. You don't draw his attention to anything, because if you do, you're implying that you're more competent than he is, and he's not competent. That's an outrage, right? So you can almost picture like an old, like Oriental warlike culture where there's very rigid, you know, structure, and if you step out of line, you're in trouble. You're in the most severe. The plane crashed. It ran out of gas.
And nobody that saw that could say anything because they weren't at the top of the pillar.
They were silenced by their culturally imposed terror.
Right.
Several of them, at least, right? Oh, Captain, fire me if you have to. We're going to crash. We have no more fuel. Oh, crap. right?
Wild.
My God.
Wild to
I
even
don't know
imagine.
how many people died in that thing, right? So the space shuttle, somebody knew that those O-rings didn't work, and they were told to STFU. What happened? Right? Why am I being crude in my words? Because it requires crudeness to draw our attention to it. When we're not forceful about these things, more people die.
Yeah, when you see something wrong, and that's just a few, like you said, there's a list and a list and a list and a list that can go on. You could write a book of STFU's
Absolutely.
moments
Absolutely.
in the history of this great world.
Right.
And every one of those comes with some sort of a price. Some paid
Huge.
great prices with
Right.
human casualties, some lesser, just like we're talking about a friendship where maybe he's not treating someone, maybe it doesn't end in somebody's life that day,
No.
but that is still a tragedy.
Well, absolutely.
You're wounding that individual, you're hurting them, you're doing harm, and obviously we're about out of time, but you've got one too. Mike said it. You've got a few of those STFUs as well.
I wanted to bring three more subjects of that.
Please.
And then the fourth one to tie
The
it all
big boy,
together.
yeah.
The big boy. Lake Washington floating bridge, the Oakland Bay Bridge, and the bridge up in Minnesota.
Look them
Everybody-
up, yeah.
Huh?
I said look them up.
Right.
on
Everybody
videos.
knew there were structural problems with them, and they were huge, and that they weren't being properly maintained.
Right.
And they're all done. Now, about 20 or so years ago, the American Medical Association came up with a statistic, right? 100,000 people a year die needlessly because of something called failure to protect. Now imagine that you get this 200-pound mastiff and it's trained to protect you, but somebody throws it a 2-ounce piece of steak and it goes, oh, let's see, I'm not going to get any more steak unless I'm nice. So when the burglar comes in, gets 2 ounces of steak and he goes, hi. Right? So I am on the nursing floor and I see that a patient is in hypertensive distress. Their blood pressure is elevated very significantly. So I go to my supervisor and I say, Veronica has a very increased blood pressure and it's dangerous. And can you please contact her physician? Because in the hierarchy, I don't contact it, the boss
Right.
does,
Right.
right? And she says, thank you for the report, go back to the floor. So, what are you gonna do? That's not your concern. What that means is, Veronica doesn't pay full price. She's public assistance. We want a private pay person. She's old. She had a stroke. So it's her time. Screw her.
Yeah.
Screw her. We're going to let her die. This is all the unwritten stuff. Nobody writes down screw her.
Right.
But we're going to kill her. Not any differently than if I took a mallet and hit her in the head, or my boss does, right? It's not any different.
You're
It's-
doing it by doing nothing at all.
Right. Right.
That's the whole theme.
Right. That happens 100,000 times a year, according to the American Medical Association. Do you think that they're really telling you the whole story?
Right, right.
Or is it a little bit nicey-niced?
In fact, I was once talking to an administrator at a school and pretty decently in tune with kids and adults and dealing with both and conflict and consequences, and
Right.
said, usually when you get them in and you question them, you're lucky if you're even hearing half the truth.
Right. Yeah.
You know,
Amazing.
if they said this, yeah, one time I was vaping in the bathroom, they probably done it 5 or 10 times actually.
Absolutely.
Or yes, I'm sorry I got caught smoking in the parking lot,
Right,
or
this
whatever
one
it
did
was. I'll admit to one to kind of say but how many more were there? And so you're right, that number's probably, assumably, low.
So I'm going to ask you a question. So we live in a relatively small town,
Yep.
right? How many faces physically on a minimum would you say that you recognize as you go from store to store in the town?
Half a dozen,
Okay.
maybe more. I don't,
Okay.
depends on the day.
No, I mean, in total, the sum total.
If I were to walk into a bunch of stores, how
Right.
many would I recognize?
Right.
A good majority.
Would you say you would recognize a couple hundred people over the course of a month?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Easily.
Easily. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, if,
So 100,000 people, what that means is that every 2 or 3 years, or 4 years, or 5 years, or every year, every single one of us knows somebody who's a dead person because of this failure to protect.
okay.
Every single one of us knows at least somebody, maybe we know 10 somebodies or more, and it all somehow just disappears.
Right.
There's 6,000 hospitals, but there's 50 states. Oh, well, let's see, that makes 500 hospitals per state, but there's 365 days in a year.
Right.
Oh, so that makes it even more, it makes it more comfortable, right? It's sort of like a little mist. And now, does that talk about the number of people that were also harmed profoundly? Or the number of people who wound up in the ICU because nobody would act and they needed to? And they're maybe permanently impaired because they had an unnecessary stroke or heart attack or severe allergic reaction or lost a limb, et cetera, et cetera. So 100,000 might be the number of deaths that they admit, but maybe the total number, and I'm not condemning any one group.
No,
I'm not.
it exists everywhere.
But I am condemning the culture,
Right.
right? And it needs condemnation or it won't wake up.
Right.
That's why we are a little impolite.
You're explaining the true consequence of us essentially shutting up.
Right.
When we know something is wrong and we should speak up.
And if we don't, and if we shut up, then someone we love will pay that they're going to be a member of that 100,000 group.
Right.
Somebody I love, I will contribute to them being a final victim, or you will do that. And it's like, we can't do that.
Right.
We can't, knowing that, we look at it and we go, oh my God, we really have participated in this. You know, I better shut up because everybody else says the earth is flat, or I'm going to get kicked out.
Right.
Get kicked out.
Mike, you weren't lying. That was absolutely a great way to hit home
Yeah.
today's show. Very real, very personal,
Yeah.
very true. Thank you for joining us on yet another episode
you.
of Reclaiming Timeless Ways, and
If you need to speak up, please do it.
have a wonderful day.